Did you know that palm oil is the most widely used vegetable oil in the world? In 2018, humans consumed nearly 72 million tons of the product, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. That amounts to about 20 pounds of palm oil for every person on the planet. We rarely hear about palm oil in the U.S. because most people don't cook with it, but it is found in many of the products we use on a daily basis.
It's in roughly half of all products on our supermarket shelves, so that's most mass-manufactured baked goods, so donuts, cookies, snacks, also ice creams, instant noodles, and makeup and personal care products like shampoo and toothpaste and body lotions.
That's Jocelyn Zuckerman, a journalist and author of Planet Palm: How Palm Oil Ended Up in Everything and Endangered the World. In recent decades, palm oil production has skyrocketed, leading to widespread deforestation and the endangerment of species that call these forests home. In the 1970s, yearly production of the oil was about 1 million tons. Fast forward to 2016, and the supply has shot up to 63 million tons. So, what's driving this massive increase? For one, palm oil is cheap and efficient to manufacture since it comes from a tree.
It looks like a coconut palm tree that you would see in the tropics, where it's grown naturally in Africa as those tall, skinny trunks and then those big palm fronds that you see. But instead of coconuts under there are these big, sort of spiky brown bunches. They're probably about 2 feet in diameter, though they're sort of oval. And inside of those are hundreds of these little oil palm fruits. So they are about the size of a date, or imagine sort of like an oblong plum. And they're shiny, sort of reddish orange. And so each of those fruits actually gives you 2 oils. So if you crush that orange flesh, you get palm oil. And then inside there's a white kernel. And if you crush that, you get something called palm kernel oil. So they have different properties, and they can be used for different things. The palm oil is what's used mainly in foods, and the palm kernel oil tends to be used a lot in personal care products and makeup. So as I said, it's this orange flesh. It's sort of this strong-tasting oil. But most of the stuff that we encounter has already been refined and bleached and deodorized, so it's basically clear and odorless and tasteless, but it's a nice cheap fat.
The two main exporters of palm oil are the Southeast Asian countries of Malaysia and Indonesia. Together, they make up 84% of all global output. However, this dominating commodity has had dire consequences on the land. Lush forests are routinely being chopped down to make way for the planting of palm trees on plantations. In just the last 20 years, Malaysia has lost 20 million acres of tree cover. Trees help combat global warming by removing carbon dioxide from the air, and it's estimated that tropical deforestation alone is responsible for about 8% of the world's yearly greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, the loss of forests has led to dangerous losses of several species, including orangutans, tigers, rhinos, and elephants. Zuckerman highlights that this massive deforestation is the result of an industry that for so long grew without restriction in order to stimulate the economy.
When Indonesia and Malaysia gained independence, they had a lot of poor people, a lot of forested land. So these were, in both countries, poverty alleviation schemes, in Indonesia at least backed by the World Bank. So the idea was to give these poor people, families, a plot of land and give them oil palm seedlings, often rubber seedlings as well, so that they could start growing that and have some sort of livelihood. And then it's just expanded since then. I mean, as the industry found more and more ways to process the 2 oils and sell them to different industries, and they put more and more oil palm plants in the ground, and they take about 3 years to begin harvest, and then they're good for about 20 to 25 years. So once you've invested in these plants and also in the mills and the refineries necessary to process the oil, that's a huge investment, so you're going to want to get your money's worth over 25 years.
The reality is that there are millions of people that rely on the profits of the palm oil industry, but the current practices in place are unsustainable. This is why scientists like Dr. Patricio Grassini are stepping up to find solutions at already operational palm oil plantations. Grassini is an associate professor of agronomy and horticulture at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He recently led a 4-year research project that studied the use of better agricultural practices on existing plantations in Indonesia, leading to higher palm oil yields without increasing land use.
These practices include things such as better harvest practices to minimize harvest losses, includes greater use of nutrient inputs to improve plant nutrition, which we found to be pretty poor, and other things such as better weed control and better soil and water management. So we are not talking here about things or technologies that do not exist, but rather we are talking about using cost-effective existing agronomy to help the farmers to produce more on the parcel of land that they have under cultivation now, so that for them it represents more income and improved livelihood for them and their families, and overall for the country, more CPO and more profit, and from an environmental angle, helping Indonesia to reach their production goals without need to further expand oil palm area into fragile ecosystems such as rainforests and peatlands.
The study also focused on improving policy in these regions, resulting in stricter laws on land use and conservation. Grassini says that it takes a combined approach to create change. Better policy and practices only go so far, and including leaders, companies, and organizations into the conversation is necessary to make long-term changes.
I'm very happy and very proud to be leading a project that is so inclusive and so constructive in looking for solutions. And actually, Indonesia during the past years has been very proactive in taking measures that can help to protect the environment. And perhaps the most important measure they have taken is to put in place a moratorium on forests and peatlands. And that's where our project fits and makes a contribution by showing Indonesian farmers and government that with the proper policy, with the proper technologies, and with the proper knowledge, it's possible for both individual farmers, companies, and the country produce more without need to expand the area into forests or peatlands.
This move by the Indonesian government to limit development on new lands forces people to be more productive with the land they do have. Grassini says that so far there's been a good response from plantation farmers in the industry.
We are showing farmers that it is possible with existing and cost-effective technology to increase their productivity. And therefore, if farmers can see that they can produce more on the 1 or 2 hectares of oil palm area that they have now, then they realize that they don't need to go out there and chop another hectare or 2 of oil palm to increase their overall production. Instead, they can do it by increasing the productivity on the land that they have under cultivation now without need to encroach the forest further. As you can see, we are trying to work here directly with farmers, helping them to increase their productivity, their profit, and at the same time contributing to minimize the impact on the environment.
Along with Grassini's approach, Zuckerman adds another perspective into the conversation, arguing that there's no need to produce so many million tons of palm oil each year. She highlights that part of the solution may be to rethink how the land is used in general.
Part of my thesis is that we don't need this much palm oil. We don't need more and more processed foods, much of which is getting dumped in the global south, where diets are changing and people are now experiencing obesity and diabetes. So I think we need to look at that land, particularly land around the equator that houses our tropical rainforests, and, keep those rainforests standing, and then use that land to grow healthy things like fruits and vegetables and grains and legumes that bodies need. And again, I think everyone's realizing we've got this finite amount of land, right? We know we can't be eating as much beef as we're eating, and we can't chop down tropical rainforests for vegetable oils. There's already way more vegetable oil in the diet than there ever was before, and these are calories that we don't need.
The reality is that there's a finite amount of forests in the world, and already too many have been lost. Palm oil production will continue, and as populations expand, so will the demand for this resource if we continue on this path. This is why it's so important to create solutions now and increase awareness of the negative effects of palm oil production on the environment before it's too late. To find out more about this topic and our guests, Jocelyn Zuckerman and Dr. Patricio Grassini, visit viewpointsradio.org. You can check out Zuckerman's new book, Planet Palm: How Palm Oil Ended Up in Everything and Endangered the World, available now online and in bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Pandemic school closures have taken a large toll on both children and their parents, socially, emotionally, and academically. But with prevention steps, including regular PCR-based COVID-19 testing, outbreaks in schools may be largely prevented. In fact, the Biden administration has identified testing in schools as a critical proactive step in recovery from the pandemic. Here's Shiraz Ladiwala, Senior Vice President of Business Transformation Projects, Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Testing for schools can be done accurately, efficiently, and affordably by using pooled PCR testing programs where multiple samples are tested at once. Batch results are reported as positive or negative and returned in 12 to 48 hours, helping to quickly indicate a potential outbreak.
Highly accurate COVID-19 testing helps school administrators detect outbreaks quickly, so informed decisions about in-person learning can be made. Find out more at thermofisher.com/COVID testing for schools.
COVID-19 vaccines are rolling out, and many Americans are looking forward to getting back to normal. However, chronic stress of the past year can impact memory, mood, and anxiety. So during June, Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, the Alzheimer's Association reminds you to make brain health a priority. Beth Kallmeyer, Vice President of Care and Support for the Alzheimer's Association, has tips to restore mental well-being.
First, think about recommitting to brain-healthy basics, like regular exercise, a heart-healthy diet, and getting plenty of sleep. Try to unplug from technology every night. Do what you can to manage your own stress, especially if you're a caregiver for a person living with Alzheimer's or dementia. And return to normal at your own pace by taking small steps and setting boundaries.
Kallmeyer says it also helps the brain to help others by volunteering in your community. For example, by supporting the Alzheimer's Association's The Longest Day event, June 20th. Find out more about Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month at alz.org.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
Farmers consume somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of all the water in the West.
Water levels are at record lows. How can we consume less and increase supply? Then,
in the 1960s, 95% of what Americans wore was American-made, and today that is less than 2%.
The true cost of cheap clothes. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.